The sun blazed over the dusty plains of Montana as the wedding procession made its way toward the old wooden chapel. The scent of horses, leather, and summer sage filled the air, while laughter echoed from the wagons rolling ahead. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but for Clara Mayfield, it felt more like a cruel joke. She sat nervously at the edge of the wagon seat, her pale hands clutching a bouquet of wild daisies, her heart pounding as the wheels jolted over the uneven trail. The men riding nearby whispered behind their hands, smirking, and the women's laughter floated through the air like needles pricking at her soul. "Ain't that the biggest bride you ever saw?" One cowboy snorted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope the wagon's wheels can take it." The laughter that followed was sharp and cold, slicing through Clara's fragile confidence. She tried to ignore them, tried to hold her chin up the way her mother used to tell her, but the sting of humiliation was too much. As the wagon hit a deep rut, it jolted violently and Clara lost her balance. A gasp escaped her lips as she tumbled backward, hitting the hard ground with a thud. Dust rose around her like a cruel cloud, her bouquet scattered, petals torn and dirt-stained. For a moment the world fell silent. Then came the laughter, raucous, heartless laughter that burned hotter than the sun above. The cowboys chuckled. The bridesmaids covered their mouths to hide their grins. Someone muttered, "Guess gravity don't lie." Clara's cheeks burned red, tears stinging her eyes as shame pressed down heavier than her own weight. That was when the crowd parted, and a tall shadow moved through the dust. Caleb Turner, the rancher from down by the valley, broad-shouldered, sun-kissed, with eyes like deep water and hands roughened by honest work. He'd been watching the scene unfold from his horse, jaw tight, his gaze steady and unreadable. Without a word, he dismounted and strode toward her. The laughter faded into an uneasy hush. Everyone watched as Caleb knelt down beside Clara. "You hurt, ma'am?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a gentleness that felt foreign in that mocking crowd. She shook her head, wiping her tears, but couldn't find the strength to stand. Caleb didn't hesitate. He wrapped his strong arms around her, lifting her effortlessly, as though she weighed nothing more than a whisper. The crowd fell silent. The cowboys who had laughed now stared at their boots. The women stopped smiling. Caleb turned slowly, Clara cradled in his arms, her face hidden against his chest. Then in a tone that was steady, low, and powerful enough to make every man there lower his gaze, he said, "You can all keep your laughter. But a real man don't measure a woman by her size. He measures her by her heart." His voice carried across the open field like thunder rolling before a storm. He helped Clara back onto the wagon, brushing the dust off her dress, as if restoring her dignity piece by piece. Tears blurred Clara's vision, but for the first time, they weren't from shame. The rancher looked her in the eye and gave her a nod that seemed to say, "Don't let them break you." He took the reins, climbed beside her, and drove the wagon himself toward the chapel, leaving the stunned crowd behind. As they rode on, the breeze caught her hair, and the wildflowers she'd dropped scattered across the trail behind them like a path of new beginnings. Inside, something fierce awoke in her, a small spark of self-worth she'd thought had died long ago. By the time they reached the chapel, the laughter had stopped completely. Everyone followed in silence, ashamed, perhaps even a little changed. Clara walked down the aisle, not as a victim of mockery, but as a woman who had been seen, defended, and lifted, not by strength alone, but by kindness. Caleb lingered at the door, watching her with quiet pride, before turning back toward his horse. But Clara caught his hand before he could leave and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Turner." He smiled faintly, tipping his hat. "You don't owe me thanks, Miss Mayfield. Just promise me you'll never bow to their laughter again." And then, before anyone could speak, he was gone, riding into the sunset, leaving behind the whisper of his words in her heart. Days passed, but Clara couldn't forget the look in Caleb Turner's eyes, that steady fire that saw her not for her size, but for her strength. The wedding she thought would be her beginning had ended that same day. The man she was supposed to marry had joined in the laughter. She'd broken it off right there in front of everyone, her voice trembling but clear. "A man who laughs when I fall will never stand when I rise." That night, she packed her few belongings and left the town, heading toward the Turner Ranch with nothing but hope and a stubborn will to start anew. When she arrived, the rancher was working by the corral, shirt rolled up, his skin glistening with sweat under the evening sun. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Miss Mayfield," he greeted. "Didn't expect to see you here." She held her chin high, though her voice trembled slightly. "You told me not to bow to their laughter." "I didn't. I left." Caleb nodded slowly, admiration softening his rugged face. "Then you've already done the hardest part," he said. He offered her a job helping with the ranch's bookkeeping and tending the small garden his late mother had loved. Days turned to weeks, and the two grew closer, bound not by pity, but by quiet respect and shared labor under the sun. Clara found peace in the open skies, in the rhythm of honest work. She began to laugh again, real, full laughter that came from the heart. Caleb often watched her from afar, smiling as she coaxed new life from the earth, or helped deliver calves in the cold mornings. "You belong here," he told her one evening as they sat by the fire, the glow reflecting in her eyes. "You were never made to fit their small world, Clara. You were made to shine in your own." But the world, as always, came knocking. The same townsfolk who had once mocked her returned to the ranch months later, desperate for Caleb's help after a drought left their fields dry. They hesitated when they saw Clara standing beside him, strong, confident, and proud. It was she who drew up the plans to share the ranch's water and supplies, organizing the relief effort with grace and authority. Caleb watched with quiet pride as the same people who once laughed now thanked her, heads bowed low. Later that night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Caleb walked up to her. "They laughed when you fell," he said, his voice soft and deep, "but now they bow when you stand." Clara smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Because you lifted me when I couldn't stand alone." He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No," he whispered. "I just reminded you of your worth. You did the rest." And beneath the wide Montana sky, the rancher took her hand and said the words that changed her life forever. "Clara Mayfield, if laughter built their walls, then love will break them. Marry me, not because I saved you, but because you saved me too." The next morning, as the town gathered once again by the chapel, there was no laughter, only awe. The same woman who had once fallen now walked with her head high, the rancher at her side, their love shining like the dawn. And as the story spread far and wide, it became a lesson whispered in every saloon and ranch house across the valley. Never mock the broken, because someday they'll rise higher than your laughter ever reached. If this story touched your heart, hit the subscribe button now, because more tales of courage, love, and redemption are waiting for you. Don't miss the next story that could change the way you see strength forever.